morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another week of Global Café. My name is Natalie Mistry, Senior Policy and Project Coordinator here at the IFA. And today I am very excited to be introducing you all to Dr. Alejandro Bonilla Garcia on the topic of numbers, norms, and legislation, championing older persons in global pension policies. So Dr. Alejandro Bonilla Garcia, an expert with dual Mexican and Swiss nationality, has dedicated his career to the development of retirement and social protection systems. Alejandro graduated as an actuary in 1975. His academic training took him to the Université des Sciences Sociales of Toulouse, France, where he obtained a master's degree in mathematics applied to economics and a doctorate in economic policy and development. Alejandro joined the International Labour Organization, or ILO, in Geneva in 1990. Dr. Bonilla Garcia is actively affiliated with various professional and academic bodies. And in addition to his contributions to the ILO, Alejandro also served as acting Secretary General of the International Social Security Association and as an attaché for social protection affairs at the Permanent Mission of Mexico to the United Nations. Alejandro received the, I'm pronouncing this, I'm not quite sure, Anahuac Leadership in Actuarial Sciences Medal in 2022. And currently, Alejandro is the president of GRACELS, the Association of Former International Development Officials in Geneva, and he holds the position of president of the NGO Committee on Aging in Geneva. In addition, he is a representative to the United Nations in Geneva of the International Federation on Aging and is a member of the former staff section of the ILO Staff Nation. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Bonilla Garcia.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and in this such a pleasant and informal setting of your global cafes. It's really a privilege, and I'm really admire your courage of attending such a session that starts with numbers and actuarial issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I just kind of wanted to start off our conversation by, you're starting off with a background in actuarial mathematics and then shifting to pension laws and regulations. Do you mind taking us through your career path and, what has been your motivation and inspiration to kind of have this career dedicated to the well-being of older adults?
Well, thank you. I could spend hours answering that question, but I'll try to make it as brief as possible, possibly starting by mentioning what an actuary is. An actuary is a profession that we deal basically with probabilities about everything: fire, thunderstorm, flooding, life contingencies, everything that can be insured, and then there is a probability. When I studied my actuarial curriculum, I didn't think that I would have a path of actor of profession in social issues. I think I would be working, as most of my colleagues, in insurance, in banking, in business. But at the end of the day, and I think that will be the conclusion at the end of the session, I really think that including mathematics, including probabilities, it's a incredible, powerful tool to access to rights of all people, including pensions and access of social rights of older people. And it has to be included in all our reflections. Why probabilities? Probability of surviving, probability of dying, probability of leaving a widow, probability of having an accident. And at college, we study the succession of probabilities. And usually, and I was really very interested in what is called the Markov chains. What happens, what is the succession of several probabilities, and in what state are you, and in what state it's the most probable state that you will be in the next future. And if there is terminal states, of course, there is a terminal state where you're dead. There's no further state. But there's also in social issues this kind of state. If you're born in a poor household, what is the probability that you will have proper education? What is the probability that you have a decent work? What's the probability that you have a pension? And for many people, these probabilities are really very low. So I found out through my career that one of the paths to really access it and to have an impact in development and on pensions and through the whole life cycle, it would be to improve the probabilities of people on accessing better developmental stages. Um, One important thing that I think is really paramount that we all dealing with issues of older people and financing of pensions, we have to have in mind is that there is a very clear insurance that most of people are not aware of between insuring and saving. This is really paramount. Insurance is one thing, and savings it's a wonderful and fantastic thing, but they are different animals. They are different animals. They are not exactly the same. So through college, I went through insurance, savings, demographics, financing, putting everything together. And then I went, as it was mentioned, I went to France. I worked in gravitational models, simulating urban activities and then economics. And I found out that in macroeconomic modeling, there were many issues, including their final demand and everything, but there was something missing. There was people missing. There were people are considered in macroeconomic models as consumers or taxpayers, but not their needs necessarily. So I think that's something that struck me. But I had the chance, and this is what really pointed everything to work on social issues and on pensions. The first job that I got when I returned to Mexico from France was as the chief actuary of the Mexican Social Security Institution. And I was extremely lucky because almost 3 or 4 months after I joined the institution, we hosted in Mexico a World Congress of the ILO from Geneva and the International Social Security Association, hosting a World Congress on actuaries and statisticians on Social Security. And frankly, I have to confess that I saw these people coming from Geneva as Martians, as extraterrestrials. Who are these people? They come from everywhere, and they are dealing with the same issues that am dealing now in Mexico in so many different ways. I discovered the ILO, I discovered ISA, but also I discovered the ILO standards. So there is a framework. There are agreements on Social Security. There are agreements on social protection, on social insurance, and governments, employers, and workers agree to comply with to comply with them. I also learned something that I think it's really crucial is that, as I think I mentioned before, everything can be insured. Everything can be insured. A ship, an airplane, a house, a life privately, but workers at the ILO, they want to ensure their livelihood, their income at retirement. That's an insurance. So I was pretty happy because I said, well, I know the difference between insuring and saving, and workers are asking for insurance of their older age. So I think that was fantastic. Then I came to reality because I did my calculations as an actuary to have a financial equilibrium, to have decent pensions for retirees in Mexico. But then I had to present all my calculations to the governing body of the institution. And the body of the institution that has representation of workers, employers, and government, completely legal. They discussed and they decided some really very stupid or nonsense things because they said, well, we have the actuarial reserves for pensions, but we're going to invest them in loans for employees. We're going to invest them in housing for employees. We're going to invest them into health infrastructure. Okay, well, that's fair enough. But what about the return? What about my pensioners? So, well, that will come later because it's the long term. But who can go against health infrastructure? Who can go against housing? who can go against loan to poor employees at a low interest rate. Well, I did because that will really prevent my retirees of having a pension. So, in any case, I remained with the Social Security institution for a number of years, 3 years, and then I created my own private consultancy on actuarial issues. And as in the United States, you have so many states. In Mexico, we have 28 states, and each one of the states has Social Security institutions. So they were my clients, and I had two products to offer to them. One was the actuarial calculations to keep in balance their pension schemes, and the other one, who was to me really very revealing, was price index calculation for the state, because in Mexico we have the national price index, and the ILO recommends that pensions are upgraded according to the price index, but at the state level, you don't have that kind of information. So one of my surprises is what indeed it should have not been a surprise. Uh, People in the north of Mexico do not eat, live, or behave as people in the south of Mexico. So their consumer basket is not exactly the same. Actually, it's quite different. And we had this methodology that is related to what I think you're most interested in hearing with retirees. So we asked retirees to fill up their basket, their market basket, and we would pay for it. And we will ask them just to let us know what they were buying and what were their needs. And we found out that their consuming basket was really completely different than the basket, that the national state basket and that the national consuming basket. So it made almost no sense to link to an indicator that has as a reference a married couple with two children as a consumption to upgrade the pension. We have something because pensioners, they have much heavier incidence into health issues. And also something that really marked me, importantly, is that when receiving this kind of questionnaires, we ask retirees, well, at the end of the day, what do you need? What do you want? And we ask them, what are their needs? What are their, and surprisingly, pensions and money was not the first thing.
Mm.
So we need transportation for healthcare facilities. We didn't need care. We need company. Even if you give me $100 to buy things to the market, I don't have the strength. I cannot walk to go to the market and come back. And going to a healthcare facility, it's so difficult that I am even sicker when I go and come back to the hospital. So I would really need some kind of transportation to healthcare facilities. I would really need not to wait in line for 3 hours to get medical attention, but I would really need to have some kind of dedicated line for older people. And so we worked on that. We
Mhm.
we worked on that. So well, it's not necessarily money, and something very important. You have to ask retirees what do they need. It's not always money, and not always financing. Um,
It's definitely
well,
about the needs that you mentioned before, really tapping into what they need in life, to kind of keep on going to like, well, this is what my basic needs are, and I need to kind of move on to the next thing. So I think it's incredible that you were able to kind of connect, the need for having this data available, not as a consumer, but as what you need. Um, yeah, absolutely.
exactly. I think that was really very important. And if you allow me, I mentioned the difference between insurance and savings. And after that big conference in Mexico of the ILO and ISA, all actuaries in the world, there were 2,000 participants from 400 institutions. We thought wrongly that the world would continue as it is, and the actuarial calculations will be the same almost forever. So we had our technique, we did our mathematics, we considered the probabilities, and it all worked. But unexpectedly, in South America, in Chile, General Pinochet decided actually to privatize social security institutions, including basically pensions, and moving from public to private, and moving from insurance to savings. So there was a completely shock for everybody. During the 80s, everybody thought that since this is Mr. Pinochet and it's not has not been tested, that's a crazy idea. Nobody will follow that. Nobody will be crazy enough to do that. So, and it happened like that till the end of the decade. But and I would stop after this to move to the next question. There was the fall of the Berlin Wall. But you might say, well, does that have to do with pensions? Well, it had to do a lot of things because there was this perception that the socialist and communist regimes were something of the past. So selling social insurance and selling social protection was a very difficult sell. Everybody said, no, that's a thing of the past. And actually, take a look at what Mr. Pinochet did. That's a modern thing. Let's move from public to private, and let's move from insurance to savings. Let's do that. So many countries did that. The ILO was completely against that for many technical reasons, and basically because it doesn't work, or it would work for a minority. I wrote an article when this decision was taken, and we analyzed in which conditions it would work, moving from one to the other. And so, well, if you're a man, you have more probabilities that it works. You have a higher education, you have more probabilities that it works. If you have a steady job, you have more probabilities that it works. You have a higher than average salary, you have more probabilities that it works. But if you're a woman, if you have an average salary, if you go through maternity, if you have a lower density of contribution, it would not work. So you take the decision. You take the decision, this would not work. So just the confusion between insuring and saving and moving through what was a la mode in those years put in danger many pension systems all over the world.
Incredible. Thank you for, taking us through, a little bit of history with your career path and in line with kind of what was happening in terms of pensions, and kind of relating it back to like the probability of all these things happening. I think it's always important to kind of have those under consideration when we're making, large decisions, or even, just at the micro level, basic human needs, what are we looking for? What are we needing? What is the probability of that affecting all that? So thank you for taking us through all of that. I kind
Mhm.
of want to ask my second question, kind of related to what you were talking about with workers and such. So what are some of the challenges in harmonizing the diverse interests of workers, employers, and governments when it comes to pensions?
Oh, there are many challenges, but I would say that possibly the first one is representation. Representation through my career at the ILO and as a private consultant, almost 45 years all over the world. I found that in most social security institutions and then in most discussions, retirees are not represented. They are supposedly represented by workers, but it's a little thing that they represent rightly their interest first and their immediate interest first, and afterwards the interest of the retirees. But there is no formal representation of retirees. I only have one particular example that works quite well, which is the case of Uruguay, where it's not a tripartite composition, but it's a quadripartite composition, and pensioners have a say in, and pensioners have a sitting in the board of social security institution. But that is really an exception. So representation is an issue. Representation is an issue. And also, I don't know how to hold this. I don't know if it's ignorance. it's lack of information, it's absence of a plain level field. In principle, you said, well, we should get together workers, employers, and governments and let them discuss. But the level of information is completely different. You must have a lawyer sitting to your left and an actuary sitting to your right and a social activist holding everybody together.
Mhm.
And most unions, they don't have that.
Mhm.
And most employers, actually, they don't care. They don't care. So the discussions were not easy. What I tried to do in my interventions at the ILO was before getting workers, employers, and governments together, give them a basic training and information on what can be changed
Mhm.
and what cannot be changed, which things are acts of God and which things are subject to a policy decision. I always had the example that it's like taking a plane. You can decide where to go and you can decide when to go, and but you cannot discuss with the pilot if he will just put a more thrust to the plane or go faster or land in one way or the other. And in some cases, workers, employers, or governments, they think that they can influence and put into demographic terms how the pilot flights the plane and how technical things are managed. So having representation, having a basic information, and knowing what makes sense and what is possible to decide, I think those are really the main challenges. There is also an additional that I will introduce also the editorial perspective is that sometimes we trust um, the authorities or we trust the experts, hoping that they are doing their job. And one of the things that I realize going through in the supervision of many pension schemes all over the world is that, well, what's going on here? I think there's an issue with not with the legislation,
Mhm.
not with the administration, not with the thing, but what about the mortality tables? So, well, nobody dares to go to the mortality tables. Where would you go to the mortality tables? And the fact is that the insurance companies and the privatized social security institutions, they have their benefit modifying and using mortality tables that are not the ones they should be using.
Mhm.
As just to explain that everybody who lives more than 110 years would cause a loss for them. But
Mhm.
everybody who lives less than that will give them a profit. So those are not the real mortality tables. And also something that I fought really very much is to don't make a distinction between men and women because you penalize women. Sometimes they apply, if it's going to be a pension for a woman, we're going to apply a woman's mortality table. And since women's life expectancy is longer, they would be penalized. They would receive, in average, 20% less just because of the calculation. So we insisted really very much on having unisex mortality tables so that this w- difference in life expectancy and in density of contributions would be widespread between genders. But most people don't really think we should go that far to inspect mortality tables, but we have to do it. So
Mhm.
there are practical challenges, information challenges, and technical challenges.
Lots of challenges to overcome, but hopefully, with work that thought I processes that like you mentioned with the
Mm,
mortality tables, hopefully we can push past or start working to push past some of these challenges. That would be lovely in a different world
yeah.
where more and more people are living longer lives, and we shouldn't be
Mm.
penalized as a result of all of that. And I just want to move to my next question, which is so inclusive pension policies aimed at older persons are greatly needed. In your opinion, how do you envision making these policies more inclusive?
I, I think that this policy should not be a surprise, and it should not be just like a silo
Mhm.
just for older people. To include older people's needs and voice, and it's really important, very important to have them included in a life cycle perspective. Um, I think that education is really paramount. We should all know that children should know that they will be adults, that they hopefully will be older people, and that is not a surprise. Most of us, we are surprised when we get closer to retirement, and then we say, well, what's going to happen here? And who is going to represent me? So I think it should be from the outset at the educational level, we should know what life is, the different phases of life. Some countries have done that, have included that in elementary school issues, the life path, and well, and and knowing that you will have to face the different challenges through your life. I have also again the very good example. I think it's again in Latin America, in Uruguay and Guatemala. There was an agreement between social security institutions and the Ministry of Education, so that children are taught about the life cycle beyond religion. What is the life cycle? What is going to be your life? And either you're going to be a worker, or you're going to be an employer or a government official, and in each one of those roles you will have to play a role, and you will have to consider yourself as a part of the community. And I think that that's part of the inclusiveness. I i have this experience that more and more people would like to have success themselves, not necessarily through the community, and not necessarily through the country itself, through the nation. In some countries, I have asked them, when do you consider that you are a group, that you're a country, that you're a nation?
Mhm.
And in most cases, it's when there's a football game. Oh
Mhm.
yes, now we are
United.
all Mexicans, and we're fighting Germany. So let's hope. But when the football game is over, or the Olympics are over, we all go back to our thing. So there is more and more this sense that I will have to do the things myself. I will have to protect myself. I will succeed myself, and this is my life. So this is something, even that has an impact in uh, fertility and fecundity and fertility. So people are having less children. That has an impact on contributors to social security scheme. That has an impact on the financing of pensions. So this trend of thinking of individuals as not being part of a greater group than beyond these things, I think is really important. And of course, there is the responsibility of the governments to lead this in one way. But unfortunately, governments change very often. If democracy works, governments will change sign every 4 or 5 or 6 years in every country, and we can have different orientations. So it's quite difficult, in my experience, to have continuity in the policies. You can agree the climate change agreement 1 year, and 4 years later just say that it's not valid. And that happens also in pensions. Every new minister, every new government has a new idea on pensions and would like to do better than the previous government.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was an incredible answer. You kind of went into a lot of different things, and I really like the aspect of, independence versus, as a community and trying to kind of have solutions that way. I think that's something that we kind of forget to keep thinking about. And so I think it's good for us to keep that in mind moving forward in terms of, having more inclusivity in all these policies. and whatnot. So I kind of want to ask one more question before I kind of start
Sure.
turning over to the audience. So if you guys have questions, you can type them up in the chat and we'll start getting to them shortly. And this is a question that's kind of just along the lines of kind of where you finished off in terms of talking about democracy and having, these political cycles where you have an agreement, you're good for 4 years, and then all of a sudden it's, it's gone, it's dismantled. So what are some of the ways, in your opinion, that some countries or they might be able to navigate this constant issue of like political turnover within democracy? And are there any international influences or initiatives that can be established to kind of prevent this dismantling of pension policies for older adults?
Well, I think that that's a crucial point, and indeed, there are already the ILO standards that basically they refer to whatever has to do with pensions and retirement income. But ILO standards are standards themselves and include also recommendations. I think that really accountability on the use and the compliance with these standards and recommendations is really very important. I'm optimistic in a way, since there is a global effort to promote the compliance with standards and recommendations, and there's a global effort to develop social protection floors in many cases. I don't know if the audience has even heard about the recommendation 202 of the ILO on social protection floors. This was adopted in 2012 and clearly divides the life cycle in three parts: childhood, active life, and retirement. And retirement has been addressed quite nicely. I think it is not perfect. It is not perfect because actually, at the end of the day, as all standards and recommendations, international standards and recommendations, they are the result of a negotiation. So this was not the best thing. This negotiation, but I think the this global movement to promote social protection is an issue. If I had the chance to influence, but now I'm retired. If I had the chance to influence something, I would change the labels. I have never liked really very much the label of social protection. I think it's too defensive.
Mm,
I think it should be more going back to the Markov chains, to the probabilities. To me, it should be social promotion.
mm,
And social people would not be promoted, would not reach better stages of life in all phases of life, in childhood, in active life, in retirement, if they are not promoted. So it's not just prevent, it's just to promote, to enhance the probabilities. So on the other hand, this is counterbalance. It's not really as effective as it should be, this global movement to
mm,
promote international standards and recommendations. Because as I said before, that there is a global trend to move, I'm not criticizing, to move a little bit to the right in most countries, and to think more in terms of individual success and leaders, more than in followers and in collective success.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I like that you're trying to rethink of like the labeling of certain things. You're promoting it throughout the whole life. Your whole life course, you're like, this is something you should be thinking about, rather than, make it stop, but you're just having it happen throughout life.
Mhm.
I do appreciate that. I'm just going to move to a question from the audience. I'm going to start with a question let me see over here. I think we kind of answered some of the questions that were voiced by Shmuel here. Kind of how would you kind of voice authorities in different countries supporting effective
Mm.
pension rights? If you have any other thoughts on that, yeah, for sure.
Yes, indeed. Something that I think really it's crucial is that we shouldn't just talk about uh, uh, close group about we shouldn't just reach converted people on the rightfulness of addressing correctly the pensions issues of older people issues. We have to reach those who are taking the decision. And in most countries, I found out that if I don't reach and convince the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Economy, I will never have the money to for my pensioners, for my retirees. It will be just a secondary thing. And we really have to reach them because otherwise they will be extremely happy just to let us get together to make recommendations, to make statements, to discuss among us how rightful it would be to address older people issues and pension issues, but they will put the money somewhere else. And uh, one of the most important meetings that I participated at the end of my career and that I had the privilege to be the rapporteur was one meeting of the Council of Europe on the challenges in Europe to access social rights. When I was invited to that meeting, I said, well, what do you mean the challenges in Europe? In Europe, everybody has access to social rights. But if you read the report, it was a report, I think, if I remember correctly, by Mary Daly, and the report of the Council of Europe. It's like a 400-page document with a typification of all the obstacles in Europe that people face to access their social rights. Many of those obstacles are should be addressed by the ministries, by the government, and others not necessarily by them, but by the private sector or by the employers and employees. So I took that European shocking experience to me to many countries. If in Europe they have so many obstacles to the access of social rights, let's eliminate the obstacles. It's not just having the declaration, it's not just having the legislation. We should face the obstacles. And in many cases, the obstacles is going back to what I mentioned, there were financial. We pass the law, we agree, we congratulate ourselves, but then there is no money in the budget of this year or in the next 4 years to finance what we had just agreed, and it would just fade away. Nobody will take it, and everybody will forget it, and the next go on will not even know that it existed. So that's one. Another obstacle is just focusing on what is easy to reach in urban areas. What about rural areas? What about specific ways of working? There is not such thing as the average worker or the average retiree. If you're a fisherman, you don't have the same kind of life as someone working on a computer in an office. If you're in a mine, if you drive a truck, so active lives are completely different, and which implies that retirement lives will be completely different. And possibly one last thing that I would like to mention, I'm taking too long. It's the public's participation. I had the opportunity, and I think it was shocking, but it was a privilege to participate in the first respondents to the earthquake in Haiti and in the tsunami in the Indian Ocean in Sri Lanka. And in the case of Haiti, there were 60,000 more dead people, many widows. And we were expecting at this social security institution, we had many problems, but we were expecting to have many widows and orphans requesting for pensions and some kind of help. And the thing is that we didn't get any. We didn't get any. And it was 1 month after the earthquake, 2 months after the earthquake, 3 months after nobody was asking for the widow's pension, or widower's pension, or the orphan's pension. It's because they didn't know that the worker had this kind of insurance. They didn't know that it had the right. And the thing is that most legislation is written in French, but most people in Haiti, they speak Creole. So we had to go through radio communication in Creole to let people know that they had this access. Same thing happened with the fishermen in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, I was surrounded by widows and orphans because of all the fishermen were dead. They didn't know that there was even an existing social security institution. They didn't know that their husband had contributed to it. They didn't even know that they had a right. So I think this inclusion, it's a national issue and requires really not only the adoption of legislation, not only the intervention of the government, but also the intervention and the knowledge of everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the answer. And thank you, Shmuel, for that question. I'm just going to move to a question from Cynthia. Cynthia, if you wanted to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. This has just given me so many things to think about, and I just love your life course perspective as well as the unisex one on the pension. But I'm aware that there are some countries introducing in middle school, some a little later, courses for early education about the importance of savings, what's the difference with insurance. And I just wonder, I know it will take a longitudinal study but if there's any early evidence of those students and making a difference in behavior, because I think that is a major key to fighting much of the more privatization of these issues. So I apologize, I will have to leave right after you answer this question. So I'm glad I got it in. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for attending till now. And really a very interesting question. I'm not aware that there is a cross-cutting study to assess the impact of this kind of knowledge and explosion. But I must say that according to my experience, discussions, exchanges, and reaching consensus was more profound, more interesting, more sustainable in countries where the level of education is higher and when there is much more democratic conscience and democratic inclusion. Um, I'm not aware, but I think it's really, really, really very, very important.
Thank you, Cynthia, for your question.
Yes.
Thank you, Alejandro. So there's a comment from Brendan Sherlock. He says, policy governs everything. Ah, all right. That's a good comment over there. And we also have a question here from Mark. Mark, if you wanted to unmute yourself and kind of pose your question.
Yeah, so it's interesting, an observation on risk. Older adults always get stung on the actuarial sting, as I call it, on travel insurance. And I find it that able to get more risk there is for travel. But the bigger question is, are levels of risk on crafting pension plans increasing as we get older as a society as a whole?
Yes. Well, I think things are evolving. This gets me back to my to college, uh, where we discuss this is in the course of dynamic models. And demography is extremely dynamic, finance is extremely dynamic, and economics are extremely dynamic, including now with technology and with climate change. So changes and the evolution of risk is something that we have to deal day by day. Also by the decisions, the decline in infertility, it's an issue. And also possibly the lack of memory and the lack of action. It was mentioned in the introduction that I finished my actuarial studies in 1975. Next year is going to be 50 years ago. And already 50 years ago, we were discussing about population aging. But even if there have been different important conferences, Madrid and others on the demographics and in the evolution, the trend has not been changing that much. And now in some technical meetings that we have been having, we think that the demographic change will be as important as the climate change in the future. If you see just China, which is 1.4 billion people now, and by the end of the century, there will be 800 million people. And this trend is going to happen in most countries. So there's an issue of how is this going to affect the economy? How is this going to affect the relation in the different communities and the relation between um, older people and younger people? And also, there is this risk of trying to finance everything through internal means. We are more and more in a global competing environment. So there are smart countries and smart initiatives that are distributing the risk all over the world. When I bought this kind of computer that I have here, possibly I paid Social Security contributions to Japan, to Singapore, and to the US, not necessarily for Switzerland where I bought it. So many countries who are inserted in the global economy more nicely, they are distributing the risk all over the world. And those countries who are not as active in the global stage, then they have problems. There is an issue and there's an expectation now that possibly we will be thinking about a new way of globalization or even a deglobalization that would also introduce a new risk. So we're always scared about the demographic issue, which is really very important, but there are so many other risks that this is not an actuarial war. It's an actuarial guerrilla, and I think that all members of the society should play a role. In particular, older people. I think that we have a power. We should have a power, and we should use that power more and more. If we believe in democracy, and we know that we are the larger part of a very important part of voters in most countries of the world, we should vote for issues that really go aligned with a nice development between the different generations, and that makes it sustainable. So the risk will be there, and there are new risks, but we'll have to face it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mark, for your question regarding that. We have a question here. I think Eileen from Ireland, if you're here.
Thank you very much. This is your whole topic is close to my heart, and it was great to hear your background. I have a question. At the beginning, you mentioned about the inclusion of retirees in trade union employers and government. In other words, that they're not represented and they're excluded, especially when talking about changes to their pensions in retirement. I'm predominantly talking about occupational pensions, as distinct from an advocacy group as part of the social partnership of government. We in Ireland are excluded from these talks, and there's a legislation being proposed by the opposition parties, and a bill is going through, which is dealing with industrial relations to give older persons, retired workers, a right to be party to discussions, because what's been happening here is those at the table are implementing changes that actually reduces their income in retirement without their say. Even in theory, it's an annuity fixed at retirement. Do you have any successful strategies on this? Because while there's government resistance to this, and employers' resistance as well, obviously.
Yes, well, the thing is that there's this reluctance to change. many institutions and many arrangements were made as the United Nations after World War II, including the ILO, which which has the most of the social security standards and recommendations. And everybody thought that it would be enough to have workers, employers, and governments tripartite participation to have a decent development of social issues. But you're absolutely right. And my experience, sadly, is that in most countries, the retirees are not represented. We push really very much for them to be represented, and I push them really very much. It's not an institutional thing of the ILO, and I'm retired, to be a political weight, and to make the political weight. Uh, I lived in France, in Switzerland for the last 35 years, and I have been away from Mexico, and I have not lived in any other country. But when I see the AARP in the US and the influence and the importance they have in voting and in politics, sometimes I feel we should have some kind of like that political power. We should move, and we should gain that, and we should sell very hard our votes to candidates. And the tragedy in a way is that nobody's going to give it this for us just like that. There's no free lunch. We'll have to fight for it, and the thing is that that calls for, we need leaders. We need leaders, and we need a movement. We need organization, and we need funds. But this is a fight that I think it's worldwide fighting. We're not just a minority. We'll be one of the largest minorities in the world, and one of the largest neglected majorities in the world. So unfortunately, I don't really have workers. They really think that they are representing rightly retirees, but that's not the case. I agree.
Thank you very much. It's going to be an uphill battle.
Yes, it is indeed.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for the answer. Perfect. So we are approaching the end of our hour, which came up quite fast. So as we are coming close to the end, I would love to hear your key takeaways from today's discussion, Alejandro. So I'll give you a little bit of time just to gather your thoughts as I will introduce our next week's topic and speaker right now. So please join our discussion next week, which will be hosted by my colleague, Ms. Katrina Buzanis, with Dr. Sver Berg and Dr. Ted Scott, as part of our series on the SMILE project on the topic of strengthening international cooperation to improve the care of older adults through technology. So please join us next Friday to listen to that great discussion next week. So now we're back to you, Alejandro. In a few sentences, what are some of your key takeaways from our conversation today that you'd like for all of us to kind of leave with?
Yes, well, it's really difficult to wrap up. I would have loved to address so many issues, because when hearing the questions, I see that there's interest in the topic. And well, the first thing is that I think we should. There are elements to be disappointed every day, but there are elements to be optimist also every day, and we just cannot let things go down. We really have to try. Possibly we should try in a different way. You know, there has been decisions that have been taken in the past few days in New York and in other cities and other places. But I think we have to think really to do things differently. If the fight that we have been fighting for the last 45 years have not really resulted in the result that we expect, and we think that things are getting harder, possibly we should do something differently. I don't know exactly why. We should reach to the not converted, not really getting satisfying ourselves to congratulate ourselves and be happy to be reaching to people who think like us. I think we have to reach to people that it's against us, and to reach to people that has the decision. We also take, I think we should have to take the opportunity at every political cycle before the politics are elected to sell our issues to them, to make them include older people issues and retirement issues in their agenda to have our votes. Also, the thing is that there is not a silver bullet solution. I think as in the 2001, which was called the new consensus of social security, there should be no opposition between public and private, but complementary, and no opposition or decision between insuring or saving. Both are fantastic, but they should be complemented, and there should be no opposition between having a tripartite discussion and involving and asking retirees, involving the retirees in the decision making. We should be fighting for that, and at least asking them what are their needs, which is not only money, and which in some countries I have encountered and met with ministers of finance and so on. I didn't know that they wanted that. I didn't know that they had this requirement. I didn't know that it was not about money, so I didn't know. So I think we have to communicate, and we have to communicate to, to the public. In the case of Costa Rica, something that comes into my mind that I think is really very important. Case of Costa Rica, they have every morning, I think it's the 5 or the 10 minutes on Social Security on the radio, and every bus driver and every lady cooking at home for breakfast, they're hearing that. So the population knows the issues, and the population knows that there's a trend. The population knows that there's a problem. So otherwise, if it's going to just to stay in universities and experts and NGOs, it might not go as far as we think. I think we have to involve the public. Well,
Thank you. Yes, sorry, you can finish up. Yeah. um, Thank you so much. A couple points I took away from that is, continue to be optimistic and keep pushing forward, and, make your voice heard at all different levels as much as possible. So, that is some incredible points that you made, and just, keeping in mind the life course approach to everything. You're trying to keep yourself in mind, your loved ones, your close ones. And I think that's just really great to keep moving forward in terms of thinking. So I wanted to say thank you again. Before we sign off, I would like to thank everyone for another great week of our Global Cafe sessions, with special thanks to Dr. Alejandro Bonilla Garcia for joining us today, and great thanks as well to the incredible people working here at the IFA who have supported this in every Global Cafe, in particular Miss Luana Colnago. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Alejandro. And we hope to see you all next Friday. Wish everyone a great weekend. So thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you for having me. Bye, Mitali. Bye, everyone.
Of course.
Bye-bye. Thank you.